Hello, gonna be story time with Grandpa Bob today, right? So, I want to try to help you younger people out when you're looking for jobs. If you're not, the college type, or even if you are the college graduate and you're looking for a job. There's a couple different types of employers out there. Okay, there's ones that have a bureaucracy, and others that have a meritocracy, right? So, the larger corporations, the larger companies, the ones that aren't run by the owner, right? The ones that are operated uh, like by government. There's government employers. These employers are usually bureaucratic, and when I say that, I mean they promote based on appearances, false virtue, and how well you backbite, backstab, gossip, do other evil, nefarious things, because it's a basically all politics, right? So not every single aspect of that employer is going to be that way. I'm just saying that that's what you're going to run into, generally speaking, right? And then when you talk about, like, say, the ones that promote based on merit, a meritocracy, those guys are going to be ones that are private owners of the company, guys that are really focused on making money, right? And that's a capitalist virtue, to make a profit, right? Why else have a business if you can't feed your children, pay for your home, and in process of doing that, also employ people so that they can feed their children, pay for their home? Do you see what I'm saying? They need to pay their bills. So operating a company that you've made and employing people is a good thing. Don't let these screaming weirdos on the left convince you anything else. It's a good thing to own a business and to run it based on merit, right? So if you've got a guy working for you and he's busting his butt, trying hard, really doing a good job, got a smile on his face, treats your customers right, your customers keep coming back, and they tell other people how great this company is because, hey, they really take care of your customer, right? And guess what? You make more money, right? And you see the guy, he's making you money. He's worth his wage, right? And what is a wage, right? A wage is something that you merit or you've earned due to your labor, right? It's not something you just deserve for showing up, right? That's communism. That's stupid. It's evil. It's theft. You're stealing from your employer when you just show up, right? And the reason I'm talking like this is because obviously I'm a Christian, and I'm going to talk to you about the difference between the Christian work ethic, the Christian ethic in business, as opposed to the secular one that came in during the yuppie years in the 80s. And I'm not sure that you younger kids are going to know what yuppies are. I'm not sure that you know who Ayn Rand is. I'm not sure that you understand how businesses used to treat their employees as opposed to how they do now. But I've lived through it, and I saw the end of an era in my youth, and I see what it's turned into now. And I think that that's some information that you need, because you probably haven't been taught this in school, right? So older people do have a lot of information if you're willing to listen to them. If you're not, you're missing out, because the wisdom is hard earned. I didn't get all this gray in my beard, and go bald by not having any stress in my life. For those of you who don't know, I spent 26 years working for the Department of Corrections in Oregon. I was a corrections officer. I didn't promote. At one point I tried, but I scored like in the top 3 of the people that took the test, but then it boiled down to all the other people that got promoted had threatened lawsuits for either being passed up or for sexual discrimination or for racial discrimination. And here I was, and I'm like, okay, I scored way higher than everybody. Like there were 3 of us at the top, and none of us got promoted, but the bottom ones actually got promoted. That started me thinking, this is not meritocracy. Like all the jobs I had before, I worked grocery and retail. And I worked fast food as a kid too. I mean, I loved it though. I worked for Wendy's, and that's where I met my wife. I was 19 when we got married, been married for over 30 years. Unfortunately, that particular Wendy's burnt down, and it was a real bummer, because we'd go there and we'd have lunch with our kids, and it was just really nostalgic to go there. And at any rate, all of those companies at the time that I worked for before the Department of Corrections were capitalists, and they were meritocracies, right? None of them, like Wendy's was a big company, don't get me wrong, and Kmart was a big company. Kmart's no longer a thing, but they were big companies. And you could see how once you promoted up out of the district into more of a managerial position with the company, you could see how, okay, this isn't really as much of a meritocracy anymore. It turns more into a bureaucracy. And you see that and you're like, yeah, but by that point, you're making tons of money, right? So I was like, yeah, I could hustle and work and get my way up to owning a few stores and, making good money. And I was like, well, but now I've got this fiance and we're gonna have kids. And I was like, well, I gotta get the money now. I can't wait for 10 years. And that's when I stopped working grocery and retail and went to the Department of Corrections, because they provided a living wage and they had some benefits. You got kids, you need to have insurance and whatnot. Well, at least that's what I was told, that you have to have insurance. Come to find out, you don't have to have insurance. And the insurance you got isn't really good. I'm retired now. I pay cash for my doctor's appointments. I tell them, hey, I don't have insurance. I need to pay cash. And guess what? They give you a humongous discount. It's like paying your copay, right? Except you're cutting out the middleman of the government subsidies to the insurance companies, and you're cutting out the insurance companies. Those two groups, it's like with college loans. When the government decided to insure the debt, what happened to all of your college tuitions? Kept going up. Same thing as what happened to your insurance costs. Went way up. Medical costs, way up, right? Don't get me started on all that. Shouldn't be run like that. We'll go back to the concept of this bureaucracy and meritocracy, right? So when I worked for Wendy's, my managers were really happy with me, the owner of the restaurant, because Wendy's was a franchise. I don't know how it is now, but it's a franchise. And so you had individual owners of restaurants. He was like, hey, I will give you help and, come to my house. He had a Porsche and a big, beautiful house in Boise. And I was like, wow, this guy's living. He's got the stuff that I want, right? And I thought, well, yeah, I could do this. But again, I wanted to have some cash now to raise my family. So when I saw that they were building the prison, I was like, okay, well, I really don't want to work in a prison, but it is a government job. My brother-in-law started working there. He was there for a year or so, and I was like, okay, well, we're not really making it. We're getting by. I was working for Bi-Mart at this time. Bi-Mart's an Oregon company, and it's a smaller discount retail membership type store. And at the time, keep in mind, this was 35 years ago, right? When everybody else was paying like for something in Idaho, I was able to start out at Bi-Mart making more, right? And after working there for about 5 years, I was getting paid $10 an hour, and I had insurance. I was full-time. I started out as full-time, right? Because they didn't hire a lot of part-time people. They hired mostly full-time people and gave them benefits. And anyway, I worked for them, and, we lived in a low-income apartment. $10 an hour was good, but it was no way, was I going to get rich off of $10 an hour, right? But still, that was a lot of money. That was a good wage for a kid back then. I think it was like 24 when I left and got on with the prison. And the jump in pay was like, oh my goodness, I'm getting paid twice as much as I used to get paid. And but the stress, that's the thing that they're paying you for. That's one of the other things I want to tell you about, is that when you get jobs and you want to complain about your wage, if you're an unskilled laborer, you don't really bring anything to the table. You're not worth much. Sorry, it's just the way that it is. If I'm an employer and I have to teach you everything, you're starting out at the bottom. We used to have a thing called apprentice and journeyman, right? So you'd start out as an apprentice. You wouldn't make much, but as you went through the years, you would get paid more and more and more. And then you would become a journeyman at some point, meaning basically that you were an expert in your field. Pardon me, got to have that coffee. 26 years in prison and drinking that coffee. I used to call it lifer's blood. I don't think anybody else did, but it was a necessary thing when you wake up at 4 every morning to be at work by 6. And you have to be there on post. You can't just lollygag in whenever you want, because the guy you're relieving, who was there all night, he's going to be really mad if you don't show up on time. And unlike other jobs, back when I was younger, you get a reputation from the other officers as being late on post all the time. Guess who's not getting help with stuff, right? You're going to get the cold shoulder from everybody. I'm not saying they're not going to respond when you're in a hard spot. They're going to respond. They're going to help you. But as far as like, hey, could you do a trade with me so I could have this day off? No. Hey, what's going on, fellas? No, you don't get it, chit chat. You're nothing. Get out of here, right? Nowadays, that's a hostile work environment. But back then, we called it a self-correcting problem, right? You can fix problems like that if people aren't stupid. There's a saying, it's life is hard. It's even harder if you're stupid. I don't know if you ever heard that before. It's true. Life is hard when you're stupid. So if you can do something about being stupid, do it. It doesn't necessarily mean a college education either. It means sit down and think about the stupid things that you've done. I don't know if your parents ever did this, but go to your room and think about what you've done. There you go. That helps. And you can come out when you're sorry and tell your brother you're sorry. Then you can come out. That's a good thing. Don't sit there and cry about how rough your parents were on you. Maybe that's why you're not in prison. Okay. So another thing we used to say us old guys is suck it up, Skippy. I'm old, so I say things like that. The other thing, don't judge us old guys by things we say. Judge us by what we do. We say lots of things that seem harsh and cruel, but we're some of the first ones that are going to come there and help you. We're going to put a tourniquet on your leg when you're bleeding to death. We're going to do CPR on you. We're going to make sure that you get treated right by medical staff when they get there. Where some of the guys who say all the nice things to your face, they're going to be the ones that are like, wow, not my problem. Looks like you're going to have a bad day. Those guys, they seem virtuous, but it's empty. There's no heart on the inside, right? So back to the employers. So working for a meritocracy, you get promoted pretty quickly if you're doing a good job, right? Bimart, I was getting ready to promote there. The problem with that was I would have had to move every 6 months or so to a different city with my family to promote up in the chain. And I didn't want to do that. I had kids. I was like, I want to kind of keep them in the same spot. So I made a sacrifice. And that's why I decided to go work at the prison because, the money's good also, but I wouldn't have to move. Now, we moved to working for the prison. That's a bureaucracy. If I ever seen one, that's a bureaucracy. They would literally take they would ask for good ideas, right, to make things more efficient. Then they would take that good idea when you send it up. They'd say, hey, thanks for the good idea. And then they would sit on it for 6 months to a year. Then they would later on present it as their good idea, the managers would. But they would have perverted it so much that it wasn't actually going to save money but cost money. We had a thing that was called the Currents. It was like a newsletter for the inmates, right? So we'd print out, I don't know how many thousands of these things every week, right? And they'd get delivered to the units. So each inmate's getting a piece of paper. We had 3,000 inmates. So each inmate's getting one of these newsletters, right? And then they'd post them on the bulletin boards. But anyhow, I was like, hey, we've got an in-cell TV system. We've got a dayroom TV. Why not just put on one of the channels a loop of a slideshow, like a PowerPoint of the newsletter, the front page and the back page of it. Just put it on loop. You don't have to have anything else. Just put it on loop and it can go on one of the channels that we use for institutional stuff, right? Wouldn't cost anything. And we could stop printing out all those newsletters. Just post one on the bulletin board in each unit. Boom, call it good. Save a lot of money on ink and paper and, for you people that are worried about trees, save some trees. I'll give you a little hint here. We don't have to preserve the planet because God's going to destroy it with fire in the end. And then he's going to remake it anew without sin. So the curse from the fall, that's going to be gone in the end. We're supposed to actually use the resources of the planet to reduce human suffering and increase human flourishing because we're made in the image of God. And more little image bearers running around is glorifying, right? That glorifies God. And every place where we have subdued the planet the way we're supposed to according to the Bible, human flourishing is increased and human suffering is decreased. And hey, imagine your life without electricity. You might not have to imagine too hard because the environmentalists who want to worship the creation rather than the creator are going to bring that to a neighborhood near you soon if you let them, right? So again, we need to go back to a Christian ethic. Back to the employers. I know I go off on a lot of sidetracks, but hey, it's fun, right? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe you don't like it. Don't watch. This is my channel. I say what I want. Well, until YouTube decides I've said something they don't like and they shut me off, but I'll just put my video someplace else. I don't care about making money. So anyhow, I explained to you what happened with the promotion process at the institution, and I was like, disillusioned with that. And then I saw other people over my 26 years go and get promoted, and I also witnessed a lot of guys get promoted up. You could go up to sergeant, and you're not considered management, but once you get up to sergeant, you go to lieutenant, now you're management. And I saw guys come back down from lieutenant, go back down to sergeant, because they were like, I don't like the way it works there, right? Because you're in the middle of everything. You're not really upper management. You're not an officer anymore. You're not represented security staff anymore. You're not part of the fellas. So we look at you when you come in a room as, here comes the killjoy. This guy's going to ruin my day. He's going to come in and tell me something stupid that some idiot up top thought would be a good idea, because they're so disconnected from actually doing the business of running a prison that their ideas are miserable, right? And some people would come in and become managers in the institution that never worked in a prison before. They might have a degree in college on some type of business management or whatnot, and they come into the prison and they start implementing ideas, and you're like, what moron gave you a degree? Get out. You have no idea what it takes to actually, work in here with these guys, right? And hey, the inmates were most of the time the least of my problem. Most of my problems came from up top. But yeah, inmates caused a lot of problems because they got problems, man. How can you live in this life, have so many problems that you can't figure out how not to stay free? Well, as free as you are, but how can you live your life and not figure that out to the point where you come to state prison, right? Usually you don't come to state prison for one offense. It's like you've screwed up. You've been to county, you went to county, and finally they're like, okay, we're tired of seeing you. You did something big enough. You're going to Statesville, right? So, but I never got to the point where I was like, I hate all these guys. There were days where you did. There's days where you're like, I hate all these guys, but hopefully you don't stay there, because that can be a real negative thing for your own health, right? I think about 5 or 6 guys I knew that committed suicide, officers from that prison, and it's a small prison. So, and there's an 85% divorce rate in the first 5 years too, because your personality is really stretched and tested when you're working in an environment like that. But at any rate, seeing how some of my friends would promote up, and seeing what it did to them and their attitudes, and a lot of times it wrecked their home life. A lot of the managers are married and divorced. And then, you don't really have any camaraderie except with the other managers, but they're all cutthroat. They're all out to get the politics on, right? They want to get their name and get promoted to the next level, because that's all they've got at that point. Some of them have a little more life balance, work-life balance. Some of them were a little better that way. Some of them, I think, were genuine Christians, and they really tried to do the right thing. So not all managers were like that, right? But it's the environment of a bureaucracy that does that. It's soul-crushing. And you might look at it and say, well, that's capitalism, right? Because you work for a big corporation that is a microcosm of communism inside of a capitalistic system, right? It was never intended to be that way. You guys probably don't know about John Calvin in Geneva, Switzerland during the Reformation. The Christian ethic was really important inside what they were developing there, which was the modern form of capitalism that we enjoy today, and that's brought so many millions out of poverty, right? So the idea would be like, say I owned a shipyard and warehouses. Pardon me. So if I was the owner, I had people in my employ, and say one of them's loading one of my ships and a barrel falls and breaks his leg, right? As a Christian employer, I'm his brother in Christ. I'm going to take care of him while he heals in his convalescence, right? And he, as my Christian brother, has a Christian work ethic himself, and is going to try to get back to work as quickly as he can, because he wants to make a living for his family, because that's his duty, and his feeling in his heart is that he needs to do that. He doesn't want to take a handout. He has an obligation that he actually wants to fulfill because of his faith. And it's the same thing for the employer. He wants to take care of his employee. Now, neither one of them should want to abuse the other, right? But when you're talking about non-Christians inside of a Christian system, there's going to be people that want to take advantage. Well, then you have to discipline them. That's just the way, hey, You've been off work, you're cleared, we've seen you out doing other things, you need to come back to work. And that would be dealt with, because back then they had a thing called church discipline. Some churches still use church discipline, and it's good because the Bible says you're supposed to employ church discipline. But that man would be put out of the church until he repented, and it was for his restoration. Now, if he didn't repent, and his employer's like, well, I'm not gonna continue to take care of you because you're lying, right? You're committing fraud. Then he's out, right? And his family's going to suffer because he's being a lazy, no good man, right? On the other hand, when the employer mistreated someone, it was up to his peers in the church to bring that before their elders, and he would be disciplined, right? And he would be out. And believe me, you didn't want to be out if you were one of the businessmen, because, hey, people will stop doing business with you because you're no good. They're like, that guy doesn't take care of his people. I know you don't hear that anymore, but that's something that used to be said. Before the yuppie era came in, companies had pensions for their employees to retire on. They had benefits like vacation time, paid vacation, holiday pay, sick leave, and it was expected that you would not abuse it. I knew old guys who had never taken a day of sick leave in their lives. I knew older guys who had taken their annual vacation, but had a ton of vacation time stored up, and to the point where the company would just pay them out, right? You stop seeing that when the yuppie era began, because it was all influenced by Ayn Rand, and she preached greed as a virtue, right? So you had the Christian ethic, which was, this is subduing the planet for the reduction of suffering and the flourishing of human beings. And there was an ethic in there about how we should treat each other with brotherly love, right? And take care of each other. And once you secularize that, and you take the Christian ethic out of it, as far as the work ethic and the ethic of how to interact with each other and how to take care of each other, you take that out and you replace it with, the only virtue is greed, and get yours, right? And he who dies with the most toys wins. That was actually on a lot of cars as a bumper sticker. Ayn Rand had a huge influence in that. She was a defector from the USSR. That was the communist hegemony. So Russia and all of the Slavic countries that they had taken over and enforced this totalitarian Soviet communism on everyone. And you need to really study your history if you haven't looked into this. Communism is evil. It's satanic. Don't let people fool you. So is socialism. Socialism is satanic. You have to look at what they did in history. More people have died in the name of atheism and communism than all religious wars added up throughout history, period. And that's just in the last, 150 years? It's bad. So, anyhow, Ayn Rand came in, and she wrote a bunch of books. She was an author, and her books were, they range from fiction to nonfiction. Most of her fiction, she was telling a story to extol the virtues of individualism. And I don't have a problem with individualism. I think that's a good idea, right? But her version of greed as a virtue, outside of any faith or a tempering ethic, it leads to abuse, right? So altruism is not really altruism when you take Christianity out of it. I'll give you a for instance, right? So you see the little old lady across the street, and her house needs painted, and so you volunteer for the program to paint houses, and maybe you're the same age as her granddaughter, and her granddaughter's pretty, and you're like, I'm a volunteer, I'm going to paint the house. But in the back of your head, you're thinking, well, maybe the granddaughter will take a shine to me. Or, in the back of your head, you're thinking, this feels good to help somebody, right? And you're like, well, what's wrong with feeling good about doing something good, Bob? It's like, but that's what I'm saying, is your motive wasn't pure doing good for the glory of God. Your motive there was, it made you feel good about yourself, okay? And so that taints the virtue, right? It becomes a self, there's a lot of self in that motivation to go do, right? So it made me feel good to work at the food bank, or it feels good to do good, or how do you know what good is, really? I mean, you're just doing what everybody tells you is good. I don't know if you've really examined your thinking on what good and evil are. And if you have and you've done it without Christ, then you're on the other side and you're evil. You're not good, right? And nobody's good, by the way. The Bible says none are good, no, not one, right? So all of us people are fallen sinners. There's a little bit of Christian theology for you right there. At any rate, so there's that. You never actually do anything that's out of pure motive. There's always some kind of self-serving motive in and behind and under that you may or may not be aware of. If you're honest with yourself and you think about it, you'll see that a lot of the virtue that you claim to have is politics. And that's how a bureaucracy works. It's based on pride and politics. It's not really based on truth. If you really want to get true and honest, we have to start thinking about what our real motivations are. And I think when you look at capitalism or the Christian ethic, then you start getting to see the real thing, right? So this microcosm of communism inside of a capitalistic system would be like working for a large corporation. The guys at the top, nobody owns the company really besides the investors, right? It's traded on the market. So the board at the top, they make all the decisions because they want to get as much profit out of the company as they can so they can pay the shareholders their dividends or so that they can increase their stock value, right? Okay. So you down at the bottom, you're a cog. They need you, but you can be replaced. And they lie all the time. They say, oh, we're big family here. You're part of a big family and we really care. But it's virtue signaling. It's not really that they care about you. And that's the way the department is. And people will say, you can't say that. I might even get some blowback from, my managers in the past or even the state themselves saying, you can't say that about us. But you know what? It's a free country. I can say what I want. At least it's still a free country now. Who knows, later in the future, we might not have free speech. The way that people are going on the left is crazy. I just don't even understand it. I don't recognize this country or those people. It's like they've lost their minds. And if you read Romans 1, you can see they have lost their minds. Anyhow, so they make all the decisions at the top, and it's from top down, and that wouldn't be bad if it were a private owner who realizes the value of his employees who are loyal, right? So if you're an owner of a company and you've worked with these guys that you've hired from day one, and you've been involved in their training, and you've seen them personally grow, their families, that, you guys are buddies, for lack of a better word, they're your acquaintances at work. And you see the guys that are really out there making a buck, so you're giving them bonuses on sales, right? Or you're giving them a commission, or there's some other way that you're taking care of them to keep them from leaving your company and going to a bigger company, like one of these companies that's a microcosm of communism. You don't want them going and jumping ship, but they're looking at this like, hey, I'm comfortable here. I'm getting paid a decent wage. My kids are getting fed. I'm able to provide for our needs. And I don't really feel like leaving. I know the boss. I know the manager. I know the owner. They're good people. They try to do what's right by us. I don't even need a union because they realize there's a labor pool that, competition. There's competition for good laborers, right? And especially if you're skilled, if you've been working at that job for a while, you know what's going on. They don't have to worry about you, making bad decisions all the time, and you showing up when you're supposed to. You're doing your job. See, that's a good thing. That works. But then you get a bad apple. Well, in a meritocracy, a bad apple's dealt with. You have to deal with them, right? You're like, hey, this is your last chance. Get your stuff together or you're out the door, buddy. I'll hire somebody else because you're just coming in late. Or you don't even call when you're not going to be here. You leave us hanging. You don't do your work when you're here. When you do work, it's bad quality work. You don't even care. That's horrible. You're stealing from your employer. Stop it. If you can't work because you're lazy, you're no good. You're evil. You're doing evil. You're not doing good. You're doing evil. So you want to be able to fulfill the obligations of the job that you're in. And I'm not going to say I'm perfect and that I never slacked. When I started working for the state, there's a long stretch of years where I'm like, oh, I can barely bring myself to come into this prison today. It was just such a negative environment, right? And you're like, oh man. You get there though, and your buddies are there, and you do some chit chat, and you're running chow line, and inmates are coming, you're pat searching people, and some of the inmates after a bunch of years, they get used to seeing you, you get used to seeing them. I knew some of those inmates for 15, 20 years, right? So in the beginning, when you didn't know them, you might have trouble with them. They didn't want to behave, and everybody's younger and more prone to be, physical. But after a while, they come to chow. Hey, Snyder, how you doing? I'm all right. How are you doing? Life in prison. You're like, yeah, I hear you. And, you do your thing. You pat search them. They go and eat chow. They sit down. It's not a big deal. But you always got the guys who are young and want to gangbang, and they come in, make it miserable. But, you got your officer friends, your acquaintances, your work buddies, right? And, they made it the time passable. You're like, okay, we can enjoy each other's company, make some jokes, blow off some steam, and the day will go by. It's just like any other job. You can have a miserable job, work with great people, and you'll be fine. You can have a great job, work with miserable people, and you're not going to be fine, right? I mean, you've all been there hopefully by now, right? And your life's working. So anyhow, inside that bureaucracy, that's how you got by. You did what you could to maintain and keep yourself from getting in trouble. But in a meritocracy, you can flourish, right? Because once you get competent in your job with your skills, you can really start to shine, and you start taking pride in your work, and you can have a competition with yourself, right? So you compete with yourself to see how good you can do. And for men, it seems to be kind of a natural thing. At least it used to be. I don't know how it is now with some of the younger guys. I know that the schools have really polluted their minds. I know that feminism has really destroyed their minds and their ego, as far as, hey, this is how I feel about myself. And they look like miserable. You kind of have to bring them out of their shells. It's like they've been beat down so much, and when you say some negative things to them, but it's in jest, and you're just trying to have some camaraderie and, man-to-man type stuff, they look like they're really hurt by it. And all I can say is I don't think they've had a man in their life teach them how to be a man. There's a lot of single parents. Mom, you can't do it on your own, generally. You need a husband. My opinion, of course. You don't have to agree with me. You can go be a loose woman with multiple men in your life and a flake and a crazy nut who won't submit to anybody and run yourself into the ground. Go ahead and see how that works for you, right? It's a miserable life. You can lie and say you're having a great time, whatever. I can't control what you do, but it's better. The optimal is for a man and a woman to be married and to stay married till they die, because you make a covenant with God and your spouse, and the witnesses in the church see it. That's what marriage is that way, right? It's not something you do down at the courthouse, right? And while we're on the topic, perverts who want to say they're married, you can say what you want, but don't make it a marriage. It's not a marriage. It's not a church. It's not a marriage. God doesn't recognize it. It's simply some social contract between two perverts. And if you don't like the word pervert, I'm sorry, I'm an old guy. What other words am I supposed to use? Want me to make up new words for things that it's just silly. Stop being silly. You're being childish and delusional. Stop it. Okay, so that microcosm of communism and what that looks like inside the bigger corporations. You don't get promoted on merit, you get promoted on politics. It's pride, backbiting, self-promotion, virtue signaling. It's a mess. You don't do good things because you actually want to do good things. You do good things because it'll make you look good, right? The company does things, donates to charity because it makes them look good. They don't actually care. They're like the individual. So if you could take an individual and then represent that same type of morality on a group, right? That board, well, there you go. It's made up of individuals and they have the same problem unless they in fact are Christian men, right? And then they'll probably be overruled by the secular people, the lost people in the work environment because, hey, nobody wants to hear what the Christian has to say about how something should run, right? The other thing too, the government shouldn't be taking care of everybody. It was never that way. The Christian churches used to take care of everybody. We're the ones that started the sanitariums. We're the ones that started the mental hospitals. We're the ones that started the colleges. We're the ones that started regular hospitals. We're the ones that started schools. We're the ones that took care of the poor and the needy. We're the ones that did all of that. But then the government comes in and starts taxing everybody. And then the people in the churches are lackadaisical and lazy about it because they're not under conviction. No one's telling them, hey, the government's taking this way in which you can be sanctified away from you. And in their laziness, they're like, oh, that sounds good. Let the government do it, right? We'll just pay higher taxes. Well, once the government gets involved, since it's a bureaucracy, right, They don't do it because they want to do good. They do it because it makes them look good. And they never do a good job. They always waste your money, right? They can never do as good a job as what you could do with it, right? So they waste your money, they destroy lives, and they look back at the wreckage and they're like, yeah, we don't care. It's a bureaucracy, right? Get in line with everybody else. And once your turn, maybe we'll help you. Oh, you don't meet the qualification guidelines. Sorry. I guess you're going to have to stick yourself out in the streets and, do whatever you can to make money. And it's like over in Germany, I remember a case where they wouldn't give this lady any assistance until she worked in the brothel, or maybe it was Amsterdam. But anyhow, she had to, and this woman was she was older with kids and a family and a husband. And it's like, well, no, hey, you have to go become a brothel worker. Okay, that's not good. That's not good, people. So I don't care if you're Christian or not. You need to listen to your Christian friends on what good and evil are, because you have no idea. If you think that it's good for her to go work on a brothel before she can get any kind of help, that's not good. The churches should be helping, and a lot of churches do help, right? But since that's been taken out of the church world and been given to the government, we've kind of left our post, and it's not a good thing. And the church isn't perfect. If you find a perfect church, run, because when you join it, you'll ruin it, right? That's an old saying. I didn't come up with that. Then let's go and look back to the meritocracy again. When I worked for people that cared, I worked for Albertsons at one point when the old man was still alive. Joe Albertsons was still alive. And I remember that I worked hard. I did a good job, and they had what they called the career advancement program. And this was back in the late 80s, early 90s. And some of the key men that were working there for Albertsons were making $14 an hour. And that was way back when I was getting paid less than $3 an hour as a box boy. Okay, so you imagine you see somebody getting paid $14 an hour and they're getting bonuses and stuff, right? My store manager got a bonus for the 4th of July, and he bought a brand new RV with his bonus, right? Because the store turned good numbers, because we had kept the thing clean and in shape and fast, and people didn't have to wait for stuff. We would go grab things for them customer service was a big, big deal. You had a smile on your face. You said, "You find everything all right today? Can I help you find anything that and you'd be like, "Great, thanks." And you say, "Hey, thanks for shopping with Albertsons. Let me help you out with that." And you would take the cart full of groceries out to the car, and you would unload it into their car with a smile, right? And you genuinely had a smile on your face and were being happy because you're competing with yourself, right? Nowadays, people fake the smile. Thank you for shopping. I hate my life. And you're like, suck it up, Skippy. Life is hard. You have to get tough. You have to get smart. To quote one of my kids, you need to level up. That's the truth. You need to level up. Stop expecting to get what you need without giving anything in return, right? Anyhow, the harder I worked, the more I got out of it, and the more I learned out of it, and the more value I added to the company. And I could have went into the CAP program with Albertsons, but at the time my dad was having heart problems, so I came home, and that's when I started working at Wendy's for a little bit, and met my wife. And then, like I said, from there it was like Kmart, and then they wouldn't promote me into management because they didn't have a spot open. They wanted to keep me, but I said I need more money, and it's like, well, we can't afford you. So I was like, okay, bye. Went to the prison. At least I think that's the chronology on that. I could be wrong. It doesn't really matter which job I left and when, but I could sit down and write that all out, I suppose, if I wanted to be exact. At any rate, so for you kids, when you're getting jobs and you're working and you discover that you're in a bureaucracy, you have to decide whether you want to stay there or not. And unfortunately, a lot of jobs are bureaucratic these days, and there's lots of wokeism that you have to put up with in these type of jobs, because the people who are running these companies and corporations, they're only doing the woke crap because of their virtue signaling, right? They just want to look good to the people who cry the most, which to me is stupid. You want to make money, stop doing that, because people like me, we see it and we're like, go woke, go broke. I'm not doing business with you. I'll do business with the smaller companies and the independent companies, the privately owned businesses. I'm going to do business with them in as much as I can, right? Obviously, I've done some business with Amazon because this rig here is from Amazon, this mic's from Amazon. I hate buying from China, and it's not because of a Trump thing. 50 years ago, this was unheard of, right? When I was a young man, I thought to myself, why on earth would we want to get in bed with the Chinese? This is a horrible idea. All we're going to do is strengthen them. It's a transfer of wealth to do business with communists. To do business with any company outside of the U.S. is risky. You have to make sure that you're getting fair trade. And you have to impose tariffs and taxes on these imports and exports so that you're not getting the raw end of the deal, right? Because basically, whenever you do business with somebody outside of your own country, you're taking your wealth and exchanging it for their goods, right? So they're gaining your wealth and you're gaining their goods. Well, when you look at most of the stuff that's made in China, it's garbage. Like, I'm also a Vine reviewer on Amazon. 99% of the stuff that they want to send me is Chinese trash. It's really bad. And it's not like it was in the old days when this started out. You could buy it really cheap, right? So like the stuff from China was super cheap and it was super bad. And you're like, whatever, if it breaks, I'll just buy another, right? But now they're charging almost the same price that you're going to pay for an American-made product, a name brand product, that's many, many times better in quality. So I would suggest you pay attention to where you're buying things. And if you can buy from companies other than China, like say you can buy something made in France or Germany or England, that's even better than buying from China, just as long as it's not made in China, right? Because communism is evil. Remember, kids, communism is evil. It's from Satan. It's evil. Stop thinking that it's good. I don't know who told you it's good, but they're lying to you, right? The same people who told you that you can decide whatever thing you want to be, you can be, right? I want to be a dragon today. I want to be a cat and have a litter box in the classroom. That's a lie. It's delusion. It's craziness. It's lies. You can't be other than what you were made to be. And if you say that, well, I feel like I should be this, if your feelings don't match reality, then you're delusional. That's what you are. Get over it. Repent. Get some help. Get some biblical counseling. Learn the truth about yourself. And learn to embrace that. Not suppress the truth and unrighteousness and hurt yourself more, because I hate to see you injure yourself. A lot of people who believe lies and they build their life upon lies end up having their house and their life crumble when hard times strike. Me, when I've been assailed by hard times, having built my life on the truth of Jesus, my life has stayed. And even though I go through hard times in life, my faith in the truth, what is true, holds me secure. It's the faith that was provided by God. It's not something that I muster of myself. God's provided the faith to me. And it's a gift. The same thing with repentance. They're not things that you can muster out of your own will solely. They come because God gives you the want and the will to do those things and to believe those things, right? And we can get into a theological debate on that as well. But back to jobs and employers. So you have to decide, do you want to work for a meritocracy or a bureaucracy? I think that it's far superior to work for a meritocracy rather than a bureaucracy. I think that finding an employer who cares about making money is going to care about you helping him make money if he's genuinely concerned about making money and paying bills, right? And selling a product and taking care of his customers. And if he has a decent work ethic, even if he's Christian or not, he may have embraced a Christian work ethic because that's the way he was raised traditionally, right? So there were lots of people in the country that weren't Christian, but they embraced this Christian work ethic. Now that we've done away with a lot of this, and we're left with the secular majority opinion on things, and you can see that the secular majority doesn't make moral decisions. You can argue with that if you want. Get your own channel. Argue about that. I don't care. You're wrong. And I don't have a problem telling people, I think you're wrong. You can tell me, hey, Bob, I think you're wrong. And I'm like, that's your opinion. Let's see whose ideas have more value on the marketplace of ideas, right? It's where open dialogue comes from. It comes in, pardon me. But at any rate, that's your little lesson on those two ideas. Another thing to keep in mind is when a corporation or a meritocracy, when a corporation or a bureaucracy tells you that they care about you and you're part of the family and all that kind of nonsense, you find out real quick when something's wrong with you that they don't, right? Oh, I've got this health problem that's going to require all kinds of time off and insurance costs and other costs. And I've seen this happen to people. They start trying to find a way to fire them, to get rid of them, right? And they'll use their absences as ways to get rid of them. They'll drum up any other kind of charges they can to get rid of them. On top of that, you can see that, like in a prison setting, there's liability is a big deal inside of a prison setting. So say, for instance, there's an altercation, a couple inmates are fighting, you step in as an officer, and you have to take them to the ground, and one of them, their head, say, bounces off the concrete floor hard because maybe you slipped when you were taking them down, or they slipped and you got twisted at a weird angle. Any of you that have played sports like wrestling or football know what happens when you impact somebody and you go to the ground. If you're not wearing a helmet, you can get hurt, right? I have numerous injuries from over the years that have never really healed up, right? I tore my Achilles tendon halfway through. That was a lot of fun. I don't want to get into all my injuries though, but the point being is that after that happens, the inmate decides he's going to sue everybody, right? Because there's lots of litigious inmates in prison that they don't really care about right and wrong. They just want to get some money, right? So they'll sue anybody and everybody. Well, the department they use you like a liability waiver chip, right? You've got a little number on you, and they'll look at what happened. They're going to review it, and they'll be like, well, maybe we can blame Snyder here for what happened, throw him under the bus. He'll get sued, lose his retirement and his job and everything civilly, and we're going to walk away scot-free, right? That's how they treat you. They don't love you. They don't like you. You're not their family. Don't buy the lie, right? It's more prone to be true in a meritocracy. I'm not saying it's going to be true, but it's more prone to be true in a meritocracy because they actually value you as a employee, right? There's an actual value in you that they can look at on paper and go, hey, this guy's been a major producer for me, especially like in a sales job, right? If you're out there selling stuff like cars or services, anything. I've had people come around to my house in this subdivision and want to sell me services for like, extermination or yard maintenance or whatever, And the guys that come around with a smile on their face that are genuine, that aren't faking it, right? And that will get to the bottom line and they can tell who they're dealing with, so they can assess the situation pretty quickly and make me the best deal and do it with a good attitude. I'll more than likely do business with them because they're doing a good job. And if they're doing a good job that way, I trust that they're going to do a good job when they provide a service. Anyhow, employers know who's doing a good job and who's not, and you're not fooling them. You might think you are, but you're not. And if the labor market were better, they'd probably fire you and hire somebody better. If you're one of these guys who's just phoning it in. So stop it. At any rate, there's Grandpa Bob's lesson about working in the world and the two different major types of employers you're going to find. And there's always a mixture and bleed over in between categories. So don't go, but my boss does blah, blah, blah. I know, Skippy. Settle down. This is in general. Okay, in general. That's the other thing. Kids, get a dictionary and a thesaurus. One made of paper, preferably before the year 2000, one that was printed before 2000, preferably, and learn some definitions because the new dictionaries, they're bad. They've redefined words to a point where I'm speaking a foreign language to some of you. Okay. Anyhow, I think that's enough. Have a great day. Try to put things in the proper context and don't think of yourself higher than you should. Paul the Apostle said, consider others better than yourself. And he also said, I am the chief of sinners, right? Okay. So think about that. You're not as good as what other people might think you are, or what you think you are. You actually are a sinner, just like me, just like everybody else. And Christians don't run around thinking that they're better than everybody. That's another lie you've been told. Christians actually think that they're worse than you. So like me as a Christian, looking at you as a lost person, I'm like, I'm worse than that guy because you know what? I know what I should be doing and what I shouldn't do. And still sometimes I do what I shouldn't do and don't do what I should do. And I don't have an excuse because I know better. But you over here, you're like walking through the world blind and you have no idea. And still sometimes you do the thing you should do. And I'm like, do you see what I'm saying? Hopefully you do. Anyhow, And everybody's a hypocrite. Everybody, Christians, non-Christians, they all act hypocritically at times. So don't sit here and say, I don't want to go to church because they're all hypocrites. Well, so are you. You're a hypocrite too, so you'd be in good company. Anyhow, I could go on and on and on. And if you do want to hear prison stories, let me know. And let me know what kind of stuff you want to know about. And we could talk about that. And I might even at some point in the future have, somebody on that wants to have a conversation about stuff like that. But right now, most of my buddies are still working and they're not retired yet, and they're going to have to watch their mouths, so they don't want to get in trouble with the department. Me, I'm like, well, what kind of trouble? Well, I suppose they could stop paying me my pension. That would really suck, wouldn't it? And I don't put it past them at some point in the future to do that. Well, you're saying things that aren't politically favorable to us, so we're going to find some policy or rule or make some policy or rule where we can actually stop giving you your pension because you're a enemy of the state and a domestic blah, 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 right? It's like, hey, go after Antifa. Leave me alone. I'm just one guy at home making videos. Anyhow, God bless and have a great day. Take care.